Welcome to the deep dive. We're really thrilled you could join us today because the journey we have mapped out is incredibly intricate.
It really is, yeah.
Today, we're immersing ourselves in a stack of sources centered around a truly gripping thriller novel.
Right.
It's called Blindfold Game by Dana Stabenow. And to set the psychological stage for you, picture the cover design of this book.
Oh, the cover is so striking.
It really is. You're looking at a stark, unrelenting, just blood red background.
Yeah.
And overlaid across that red is the faint, almost chillingly precise white reticle of a radar target. Instantly, before you even open the cover, that visual language establishes a tone.
A tone of really high-stakes geopolitical tension.
Exactly. It communicates this very specific anxiety, the feeling of being hunted by something you can't fully see.
Which is, the visual is highly evocative, and it acts as the perfect primer for the source material we're examining today.
Yeah.
The radar reticle implies precision, right? Tracking. Yet the overwhelming red suggests just total chaos and violence.
Which is exactly what happens.
Right. That intersection between technological surveillance and brutal human action, that's the precise thematic crossroads of these excerpts.
And our mission today is to dissect the terrifyingly realistic logistics depicted within these pages.
We are going deep into the mechanics of it all.
We really are.
Yeah.
We're going to map the actual mechanics of global terrorism, decode the labyrinthine shell games of modern maritime piracy.
Which is a huge part of this.
Massive. And we'll expose the deeply frustrating institutional realities of international intelligence gathering.
Because while this is framed as a fictional narrative, the underlying architecture operates as a masterclass. It shows how invisible threats move unimpeded across our entirely porous global supply chains.
That is the defining tension we'll be exploring throughout this analysis.
Definitely. These sources brilliantly illuminate the dangerous disconnect that exists within national security apparatuses.
Yeah, that gap between the ground and the top.
Exactly. On one side, you have the ground-level intelligence gatherers, the human assets actually operating in the field, observing the anomalies, collecting the raw puzzle pieces.
Right.
And on the other side, you have the bureaucratic leadership insulated in secure offices governed by political optics.
Who actively refuse to assemble those pieces.
Exactly. It is a profound study in institutional blindness and the catastrophic costs of that willful ignorance.
Okay, let's unpack this. We have to begin at ground zero, just establishing the baseline of the threat.
Setting the scene.
Right. The narrative thrust starts on October 5th in Pattaya Beach, Thailand. The environmental setup is crucial here.
It's a very specific kind of place.
It is. It's a sunny, bustling resort town, specifically an area internationally known for its dense nightlife and, frankly, its booming sex tourism industry.
So it's characterized by transience and distraction.
Exactly. Everyone is looking the other way. Suddenly, a massive explosion obliterates a popular nightclub called the Funhouse.
Just total devastation.
The human toll is immediate and devastating. 114 people are killed.
Wow.
And the casualties include 17 American servicemen on leave, numerous foreign tourists, and dozens of local Thai workers.
And the delivery system for this carnage?
A bomb hidden inside a standard soccer ball.
From a tactical standpoint, the soccer ball is a horrifyingly elegant delivery mechanism.
Elegant in a dark way, yeah.
Right, because when you analyze improvised explosive devices, the primary challenge is infiltration.
Getting it through the door.
Exactly. A soccer ball is culturally ubiquitous. It possesses this innate innocence.
Yeah, nobody looks twice at a soccer ball.
A person carrying one wouldn't trigger a secondary security scan or even a second glance in virtually any urban environment on the globe.
It's invisible.
And the text specifies that the device was packed with a highly advanced timing mechanism and detonated precisely on the packed dance floor.
To maximize the damage.
Right, to maximize the confinement of the blast wave and the resulting shrapnel dispersion. But the physical explosion is only the catalyst here.
Because the critical intelligence data is generated in the immediate aftermath.
Exactly.
Because in the chaos that follows, while the structural glass is shattering, the survivors are panicking, the delivery boy outside the club is literally blown backward, completely covered in the pad thai he was carrying.
It's absolute pandemonium.
But amidst that, 3 disparate witnesses register the exact same environmental anomaly.
This is the crucial detail.
You have an elderly Japanese tourist, a woman running a local comic book shop, and that delivery boy.
And what do they see?
They all notice 2 Asian men standing on a nearby corner. These men are perfectly calm.
No reaction at all.
None. They aren't scanning the area for secondary devices. They aren't checking themselves for shrapnel wounds. They aren't rushing to help anyone.
They are simply observing the destruction with complete chilling detachment.
Yes.
In the realm of behavioral intelligence, that specific lack of reaction is an overwhelming diagnostic indicator.
Because it's just not natural.
It's completely unnatural. The autonomic human response to a concussive blast of that magnitude is universal.
Fight, flight, or freeze.
Exactly. The lizard brain takes over. Absolute stillness and observational detachment indicate prior knowledge and anticipation.
They knew it was coming.
They knew the blast wave was coming, they braced for it, and they were evaluating the yield.
Just grading their own test.
Right. And once they complete their visual assessment, they simply turn and walk away at an even, unhurried pace. They just blend back into the panicked crowd.
Which introduces us to one of the most fascinating operatives in this entire logistical web, Arlene Hart.
She is incredible.
You have to visualize her cover, because it is brilliant. She is plump, middle-aged, improbably blonde, and carries the exact aesthetic of a grandmother enjoying a luxury cruise vacation.
The ultimate disguise.
Right. Her overt occupation is writing a monthly column for Travel and Leisure magazine.
But her actual operational identity is quite different.
Completely. She is a retired Associated Press war correspondent with 30 years of hard-earned field experience, who secretly moonlights as a freelance human intelligence asset, a human and operative for the Central Intelligence Agency.
Arlene really represents the absolute pinnacle of modern espionage tradecraft.
Because she doesn't look like James Bond.
Precisely because she is the antithesis of the cinematic spy stereotype. In an era dominated by signals, intelligence, and satellite surveillance, a human asset's greatest weapon is invisibility.
And nobody suspects the grandmother taking photos.
Arlene operates entirely below the threshold of suspicion. She speaks multiple regional dialects, possesses a photographic memory for facial morphology, and her operational cover is indistinguishable from her genuine life.
Right, when the blast hits, she actually sustains a minor cut from flying debris.
But she doesn't panic.
No, her immediate reaction isn't to draw a weapon or radio for backup. She just wipes the blood from her forehead, casually extracts a standard digital tourist camera, and begins trailing the two anomalous men.
Her surveillance technique is a masterclass in exploiting ambient environments.
It really is. She trails them away from the immediate blast radius, navigating down a peaceful side lane to an open-air beach cafe.
And she sets up shop right next to them.
She does. The two men sit and order chai tea. Arlene positions herself a table away. She strategically orders a Budweiser.
Which is such a deliberate choice.
Oh, absolutely. It solidifies her loud American tourist persona.
Yeah.
She just sits there and observes as the two men are joined by two new arrivals.
And these arrivals are significant.
Very. One is a Singaporean national named Nortman, described in the text as possessing the smooth, highly styled aesthetic of an Asian Elvis Presley.
Quite a visual.
Yeah. The other is a Chinese man named Fang, who carries the unmistakable physical markers of a street brawler, including a prominent scar bisecting his eyebrow.
So she has her targets. How does she capture them?
She leverages her obnoxious tourist cover flawlessly. She recruits a French waiter to take candid photos of her posing with her drink.
Ensuring the digital camera's focal depth captures the faces of all four men conversing in the background.
Exactly. She gets them all in the frame while smiling with her Budweiser.
What's fascinating here is the psychological profile of the terror event itself.
The bombing back at the club.
Right. Arlene is implicitly analyzing this as she takes those photos. Consider the macrodynamics. A sophisticated device detonates, causing 114 fatalities and massive infrastructural damage.
But then, nothing.
Total silence. No geopolitical entity claims responsibility. No splinter group releases a manifesto to the international press.
Which is weird, right?
It's highly anomalous. Historically, asymmetric warfare relies heavily on the photogenic, communicative properties of violence. The destruction is a billboard for the ideology.
The text explicitly contrasts this with the methodologies of established organizations. Groups spanning from the IRA to al-Qaeda engineer their attacks to maximize media coverage,
utilizing the ensuing terror to amplify their political demands.
But these operatives in Pattaya, they vanish into the noise.
And to an intelligence analyst, that silence is infinitely more terrifying than a broadcasted threat.
Why is that?
Because if the perpetrators are not claiming credit, the logical deduction is that the mass casualty event was not the ultimate objective.
It was just a test.
The sheer scale and sophistication of the Pattaya Beach bombing strongly implies it was merely a practice run, a diagnostic test.
Wow. A test that killed 114 people.
A field trial to evaluate a new detonation prototype or a stress test of their own covert logistical supply lines in preparation for an operation of exponentially greater magnitude.
And the fact that these unknown bombers immediately rendezvous with high-profile maritime criminals.
Which we later learn Fang and Nortman are.
Right. That provides a critical vector. Whatever this escalating plot entails, its delivery mechanism involves the global shipping lanes.
Which requires us to trace the movement of the necessary materials. We have to shift our focus to the vast underworld of illicit logistics.
Because engineering an attack of that hypothesized scale requires specialized supplies.
You can't just buy this stuff at a hardware store.
No, you can't. Arlene manages to track the two mysterious Asian operatives, whom she has temporarily codenamed Smith and Jones, from the heat of Bangkok to the transit hub of London.
But she loses them.
Yeah, the mundane realities of bureaucracy intervene. Her CIA-issued corporate credit card is declined at a Heathrow terminal, causing her to lose visual contact.
Which is just so perfectly bureaucratic.
Isn't it? However, the wider intelligence net eventually picks up their transit signatures. Smith and Jones navigate through Moscow, ultimately arriving in Odessa, Ukraine.
The geographical shift to Odessa is highly significant here.
Why Odessa specifically?
In the decades following the dissolution of the Soviet Union, that specific region metastasized into an unprecedented global bazaar for surplus and unsecured military hardware.
Just a supermarket for weapons.
The source text accurately notes the existence of over 50 lightly guarded sites across the former Soviet bloc housing weapons-grade materials.
50 sites.
Odessa, with its deep-water ports and entrenched corruption networks, functions as a primary circulatory hub for moving that black market inventory into the global theater.
And the node they connect with in Odessa perfectly embodies this environment.
Peter Volk.
Yes. They meet a broker named Peter Volk, which translates directly to Peter the Wolf.
He's quite the character.
He's a vivid character study in the banality of black market arms dealing. He is flamboyant, drenched in expensive cologne, tailored in Italian suit, and dripping with gold and diamonds.
Operating out of a fortress.
A heavily fortified, luxurious office suite overlooking the Black Sea. And adding to his bizarre profile, he is deeply obsessed with the American science fiction television series Battlestar Galactica.
Which is such an odd, humanizing detail.
He actually unironically utilizes the phrase, by your command, when confirming a lethal transaction with his clients.
It is a striking detail applied to a man who facilitates mass murder for profit.
But that detail serves a vital thematic purpose.
It underscores the purely transactional, amoral nature of this logistical underworld. For brokers like Peter, geopolitical ideology is entirely irrelevant.
He doesn't care who wins the war.
Not at all. He operates strictly on supply and demand. He is a service provider in a specialized market. However, the specific service that Smith and Jones are requesting manages to unnerve even a hardened facilitator like Peter the Wolf.
Because they aren't asking for normal weapons.
They are not negotiating for crates of surplus AK-47s or standard military-grade RDX explosives. Their procurement list demands a highly controlled substance.
Cesium-137.
Exactly.
When Cesium-137 enters the conversation, the threat matrix instantly escalates from a localized bombing to a potential apocalyptic scenario.
It really does.
For those navigating this concept, we need to thoroughly map out exactly what this substance is and why its procurement is a worst-case scenario for global security.
To understand the threat, we have to look at the physics and the intended application. Cesium-137 is a highly radioactive isotope. It does not occur naturally in the environment. It's a direct byproduct of nuclear fission processes, commonly synthesized for use in very specific medical and industrial applications.
Like cancer treatments.
Most notably within the heavy shielding of radiotherapy machines utilized in oncology wards.
What does it look like?
In its physical form, it resembles a fine, slightly luminescent blue talcum powder.
Wow!
And because of its specific chemical properties, it is highly soluble and incredibly dispersible. It is universally recognized by security experts as the absolute optimal payload for a radiological dispersion device.
Colloquially known as a dirty bomb.
Exactly.
This is a critical distinction to make. We are not discussing a thermonuclear weapon designed to level a metropolitan skyline with a massive blast yield.
No, the explosion itself isn't the main destructive force.
A dirty bomb utilizes conventional explosives like C4 or TNT simply as a mechanism to scatter the radioactive material over the widest possible geographic area.
The bomb is just the delivery truck for the powder.
But if the explosive yield is relatively small, Why does the text frame the acquisition of cesium-137 as an existential, nation-crippling threat?
The threat is not measured in the immediate kinetic blast. It is measured in the catastrophic, long-term environmental contamination.
Fallout.
Right. And the text grounds this threat by citing a chilling historical precedent, the 1987 radiological incident in Goiânia, Brazil.
That story is terrifying.
The logistics of that disaster are essential to understand. A private medical oncology clinic went bankrupt and the facility was abandoned.
Leaving the equipment behind.
Local scavengers broke into the derelict building, dismantled a teletherapy unit, and breached the internal lead capsule. Inside, they found the glowing blue powder of cesium-137.
And they had no idea what it was.
Lacking any scientific context and mesmerized by its luminescence, they removed the material and brought it into their community.
Oh, man.
They handled it directly. They rubbed it onto their skin so they would glow in the dark to entertain their families.
That reality is absolutely heart-wrenching. You have innocent people essentially painting themselves and their children with a lethal, invisible poison, completely unaware of the radiological hazard.
The human cost was horrific, and the logistical spread was immediate.
It just got everywhere.
The microscopic powder transferred to their hands, into their homes, onto their clothing, and into their food supply. By the time regional health authorities identified the radiological signature, the contamination had spread exponentially.
Hundreds of citizens were acutely irradiated.
And the medical reality of severe radiation sickness is agonizing. The ionizing radiation shreds cellular DNA, leading to catastrophic internal hemorrhaging, systemic blood poisoning, and organ failure.
And cleaning it up must have been a nightmare.
The governmental response required herding 34,000 potentially exposed individuals into an Olympic soccer stadium to be scanned with Geiger counters.
Just massive scale panic.
The decontamination effort required the total demolition of numerous residences, the literal scraping away and vitrification of urban topsoil, and the creation of a massive nuclear waste repository just to contain the debris of a single small medical canister.
Now, when you take that historical data point and weaponize it, the implications are staggering.
Beyond staggering.
If you take just a few ounces of cesium-137, wrap it around a conventional explosive core, and detonate it in a densely populated hub, say, the financial district of Seattle or Los Angeles, the initial blast wave might only claim a few dozen lives.
But the radioactive plume?
Carried by urban wind tunnels, it would blanket dozens of square blocks in a toxic fallout.
Exactly. The primary function of a radiological dispersion device is catastrophic area denial.
You just can't go back there.
That entire contaminated zone is instantly rendered uninhabitable. Every surface, every ventilation system, every water source is compromised.
The immediate societal impact is total paralysis.
Essential metropolitan services cease to function. The healthcare infrastructure is instantly overwhelmed, not just by the acutely irradiated, but by tens of thousands of the worried well citizens who fear exposure and flood triage centers,
collapsing the medical system's capacity entirely.
Furthermore, the long-term economic damage is nearly incalculable. You are looking at billions of dollars in decontamination costs, the permanent abandonment of prime commercial real estate, and the psychological scarring of a major economic center.
It is a weapon designed for mass disruption and economic sterilization.
And Smith & Jones are securing this material with chilling efficiency.
They finalized the purchase via an untraceable electronic transfer from a numbered Swiss account.
Capital is clearly not a limiting factor in their operation.
No. Peter the Wolf agrees to leverage his network to source the cesium-137 from unsecured facilities within North Korea, arranging for its covert shipment to the Russian port city of Petropavlovsk.
But Smith & Jones don't tolerate loose ends.
Not at all. The operational security they maintain is absolute. Shortly after the transaction is finalized, Peter's heavily fortified office building is obliterated in a massive nocturnal explosion.
They are meticulously erasing their logistical footprint.
Though Peter is a survivor.
Now, the narrative reveals that Peter is a consummate survivor. We actually catch a glimpse of him later in the text, entirely unharmed, discreetly flirting with his girlfriend Masha at an Eastern European train station.
While a CIA operative attempts to subtly extract information from him.
Peter possessed the foresight to fake his own assassination to evade the inevitable heat.
Smart man.
But the tactical message sent by Smith & Jones remains unambiguous. Any individual with knowledge of the cesium procurement is an unacceptable liability and must be neutralized.
So we now have the components of a catastrophic plot actively moving across the board. The bomb is being sourced. The delivery network is being finalized.
Which means we need to shift our analytical lens.
Right. Away from the operational field and to the structural heart of American intelligence gathering. We move deep inside the Central Intelligence Agency in Langley, Virginia.
Introducing us to the character of Hugh Rincon.
Hugh is a senior analyst. His mandate is to process the overwhelming terabyte-level flood of disparate global reports and synthesize them into actionable, coherent threat assessments.
The text evocatively describes him as the spider at the center of the web.
But currently, his web is vibrating with white noise.
Hugh's daily reality provides a stark, necessary contrast to the kinetic, life-and-death environment of the field operators.
He exists in a sterile, fluorescent-lit purgatory.
His desk is buried beneath endless requests for operational funding and interagency friction. He is chronically sleep-deprived, constantly battling the signal-to-noise ratio of global data.
And the relentless pressure is dissolving his personal life.
Yes, his marriage is actively failing.
His marriage to Sarah Lange, a career Coast Guard officer, is being crushed by the geographical distance and the classified nature of his existence. The small soapstone bear she gave him sits on his desk as a constant, silent indictment of the life he is sacrificing for the agency.
And into this environment of extreme bureaucratic fatigue walks Arlene Hart.
She arrives at Langley with the unedited digital files she secured at the beach cafe in Thailand.
The photos from her digital camera.
Hugh subjects the images to rigorous analysis, utilizing the agency's advanced facial recognition databases. The software confirms the identities of the two men meeting with the unknown bombers.
And the hits are definitive.
One is Jap Nortman, widely recognized in intelligence circles as an absolute savant in the realm of maritime shipping theft.
And the other?
The other is Fang, a notoriously brutal operator within the South China Sea piracy syndicates.
For an intelligence analyst, this interception of data points is the equivalent of a siren.
It's blaring red.
You have unidentified perpetrators who have just executed a sophisticated, unclaimed mass casualty bombing, engaging in direct logistical coordination with two of the most successful maritime criminal syndicates on the planet.
The analytical deduction requires no grand leap.
None at all. The next phase of the operation is imminent, and the delivery vector will utilize the global maritime shipping lanes.
Armed with this critical synthesis, Hugh elevates the intelligence directly to the director of the CIA. And here's where it gets really interesting.
Because the text masterfully dissects the concept of the bureaucratic wall.
The current CIA director is not a career intelligence officer who ascended through the clandestine ranks.
No, he's a political appointee.
His background is rooted in wealthy campaign donations and a tenure as a congressman. His operational matrix is governed by optics,
maintaining political capital, scheduling tennis matches with influential senators, and avoiding any actions that might generate negative press or political friction.
He condescendingly refers to Hugh as "my boy" and systematically dismantles the entire threat assessment.
The director's outright dismissal is a textbook example of a highly dangerous cognitive bias known as confirmation bias, or cognitive closure.
How so?
He reviews the raw data, the anomalous non-reaction in Pattaya, the verified meeting with maritime smugglers, the subsequent intelligence regarding the procurement of cesium from Peter the Wolf, but he completely refuses to synthesize those data points into a valid threat profile.
Because it fundamentally contradicts the agency's established narrative.
Exactly. In the post-9/11 intelligence architecture depicted in these sources, the institutional focus is monolithically fixed on the Middle East and the established networks of al-Qaeda.
And these guys are Asian.
Because the suspects in Hugh's report are of Asian descent, and the radiological material appear to be sourced from North Korea, the threat simply does not align with the director's prioritized, politically fashionable threat matrix.
It is systematically filtered out as background noise.
It is the definition of institutional tunnel vision.
The director literally asks Hugh a completely reductive question. Do you have absolute proof of al-Qaeda involvement?
And when Hugh admits that the data points elsewhere, the director effectively orders him to abandon the inquiry.
He refuses to authorize a heightened national threat level. And crucially, he absolutely forbids Hugh from sharing the intelligence with adjacent agencies.
Specifically, the United States Coast Guard.
The director's rationale is that alerting the maritime defenders based on what he categorizes as pure speculation would only incite unnecessary panic and damage his standing with the executive branch.
This encapsulates the fundamental systemic failure of imagination that plagues massive bureaucracies.
They need a smoking gun.
The administrative system demands absolute undeniable proof before it is willing to authorize preemptive action. However, the paradox of asymmetric warfare is that by the time you possess absolute undeniable proof of a terrorist operation, the explosive device has already detonated.
Hugh finds himself entirely isolated, a Cassandra within his own agency.
But his instincts are right.
Yet his analytical instincts are swiftly validated when a trusted colleague, Harvey Moskowitz, from the Middle Eastern desk, quietly shares compartmentalized intelligence.
Harvey has intercepted a highly credible rumor
Originating from Hong Kong syndicates, detailing the movement of a massive quantity of radiological material through Tiraspol, Moldova.
When Hugh cross-references that data point on a map, the reality crystallizes. Tiraspol is geographically adjacent to Odessa.
The pieces fit.
The decentralized rumor perfectly corroborates the human tea gathered on Peter the Wolf. The cesium-137 is actively in transit.
The weapon is being assembled.
And the Coast Guard, the specific agency mandated to secure the maritime borders against this exact type of infiltration, is operating in a state of enforced ignorance.
Which perfectly transitions our analysis away from the carpeted, politically paralyzed hallways of Langley and thrusts us directly into the unforgiving realities of the operational front lines.
We need to examine exactly what the Coast Guard is enduring while Washington debates optics.
We pivot to the brutal, freezing expanse of the Bering Sea. Here we are introduced to Sarah Lange, Hugh Rincon's estranged wife.
She serves as the executive officer, the XO, aboard the United States Coast Guard cutter Sojourner Truth.
The environmental and professional contrast to Hugh's world is jarring.
It's night and day.
While Hugh is suffocating under layers of bureaucratic red tape and office politics, Sarah is physically battling hurricane-force low-pressure systems in pitch-black, freezing oceanic conditions.
Sarah represents a deeply compelling character study in leadership and resilience.
She has to be tough.
The text details that she is one of only 11 women serving on a crew of over 100 personnel. To navigate the complex gender dynamics and assert her command authority, she adopts a highly austere professional persona.
She deliberately desexes her appearance,
utilizing oversized utilitarian uniforms, avoiding all makeup, and maintaining her hair in a severe functional style. Her ambition is absolute.
She wants her own command.
She is driving toward her own command, and she demands peak operational excellence from herself and her crew in an environment that actively attempts to kill them daily.
To truly impress upon the reader the extreme competence of Sarah and her crew, the narrative provides a visceral, day-in-the-life sequence.
The medevac scene.
The Sojourner Truth intercepts a frantic distress transmission from a commercial fishing vessel, the Arctic Wind. A deckhand has suffered a catastrophic injury with a 3-inch steel J-hook deeply embedded in his eye.
Ouch.
The environmental variables for the rescue are a nightmare. The fishing vessel is a chaotic mess of heavy rigging, swinging cranes, and exposed wiring, heaving wildly in the heavy swells.
Yet, the Coast Guard's response is devoid of hesitation.
Operating in total darkness, they extinguish the cutter's external lighting to maximize the efficacy of their night vision optics.
They launch an MH-65 helicopter into gale force winds, maintain a stable hover over the violently pitching deck of the Arctic Wind, and execute a flawless, millimeter-perfect medical hoist to extract the critically injured man.
That sequence is meticulously constructed to establish the sheer operational supremacy of the personnel manning the maritime borders.
It demonstrates that while the intelligence apparatus in Washington is paralyzed by risk aversion, the tactical operators are executing incredibly complex life-or-death maneuvers with absolute precision.
However, this demonstration of competence immediately sets up one of the most agonizing moments of dramatic irony in the entire narrative.
It's incredibly tense.
Shortly after the medical evacuation, the Sojourner Truth resumes its patrol pattern and visually detects a massive Panamanian-flagged commercial freighter named the Star of Bali.
And its course is strange.
The freighter's plotted course is highly anomalous. It is operating far outside the established commercial shipping lanes, transiting from the Russian port of Petropavlovsk towards Seward, Alaska.
Operating on standard protocol, the Coast Guard hails the vessel over the VHF radio.
The freighter's captain responds with practiced politeness, providing a highly plausible cover story.
Right. He says they diverted course to avoid a severe weather system, and their cargo manifests declare a standard load of steel and drilling equipment.
From the perspective of Sarah and her commanding officer, Captain David Lowe, there is absolutely no actionable reason to suspect the vessel.
None. The maritime paperwork is flawless, the captain's demeanor is cooperative, and they possess no intelligence suggesting otherwise.
Because Langley didn't share it.
They issue standard maritime pleasantries, wishing the freighter a safe transit, and allow it to proceed unhindered.
But the audience is armed with the synthesized intelligence that Langley refused to disseminate.
We know that the terrorist cell loaded their secured cargo in Petropavlovsk.
We know the Star of Bali is the delivery vehicle.
The ship carrying the radiological dispersion device literally sails within visual range of the heavily armed defenders who possess the capability to neutralize the threat.
Simply because the bureaucratic wall prevented the transmission of a warning.
It is a maddening illustration of systemic failure.
But Sarah does not have the luxury of dwelling on passing commercial traffic, because the Sojourner Truth is immediately thrust into a kinetic confrontation.
The Russian vessel.
Their radar paints a Russian commercial fish processor, the Fyodora, operating illegally a full 2 miles inside the United States exclusive economic zone.
And this is not a navigational error.
The Fyodora has a documented history of aggressively crossing the maritime boundary line, playing a high-stakes game of geopolitical chicken, stealing American resources, and slipping back into Russian territorial waters before Coast Guard assets can intercept.
In this instance, Captain Lowe decides to definitively end the game.
It is a masterclass in the escalation of force.
When the Russian vessel ignores direct orders to heave to, Lowe authorizes the manning of the cutter's heavy weapon systems.
Specifically, the twin .5 caliber machine guns and the Mk-38 25mm chain gun.
He pushes the 284-foot cutter to its maximum flank speed and executes a highly aggressive tactical maneuver, cutting directly across the bow of the massive Russian processor,
forcing them to initiate an emergency power down to avoid a catastrophic collision at sea.
This initiates the boarding sequence, led by Sarah.
The tactile details are intense. The boarding party is clad in heavy dry suits, reinforced Kevlar body armor, and ballistic helmets, armed with Remington shotguns and sidearms.
They board the Fyodora, which is described as a filthy, rust-streaked industrial nightmare.
They are immediately confronted by the Russian captain, Protopopov. He's overtly hostile, highly insolent, and attempts to utilize physical intimidation.
Looking Sarah up and down with deep disrespect while blatantly lying that his processing nets were not actively deployed in the water.
Sarah's response is a textbook display of command presence. She doesn't rise to the bait or escalate the verbal conflict.
She maintains a state of icy, absolute professionalism, systematically dismantling his arguments and asserting unquestionable legal authority.
And when a flotilla of adjacent Russian vessels attempts to aggressively swarm the Sojourner Truth to intimidate the boarding party,
Captain Lowe throttles up the cutter's massive diesel engines and re-indexes the heavy weaponry, immediately scattering the hostile fleet.
Sarah formally relieves Protopopov of his command and seizes the vessel under federal law.
It is a massive tactical victory for the crew.
But for the reader, the triumph is deeply hollow, overshadowed by the knowledge that the true existential threat, the Star of Bali, has already slipped smoothly through the net.
To understand exactly how a massive freighter carrying a dirty bomb can simply vanish into the background noise of global commerce, we have to dissect the architecture of piracy.
This takes us to Hong Kong, the beating heart of international shipping, and deep into the operations of Jap Nortman.
Nortman is the intellectual engine behind the world's most sophisticated maritime theft syndicates.
His origin story is critical to understanding his methodology.
He is a Singaporean polyglot, fluent in English, Dutch, Mandarin, French, Russian, Japanese, Hebrew, and Arabic.
And he was raised under the tyrannical control of a strict, emotionally abusive father who served as a high-ranking customs agent.
A man who attempted to force Jap into an arranged marriage and a stifling bureaucratic career.
Nortman's rejection of that life is absolute and violent. The narrative details a breaking point where he physically confronts his father, inflicting a beating so severe it leaves the older man permanently deaf in one ear and blind in one eye.
He then severs all ties and aligns himself with the brutal pirate Fang.
Nortman provides the strategic genius. Fang provides the kinetic violence.
If we connect this to the broader socio-economic picture, Nortman is the physical embodiment of the dark side of hyper-globalization.
He inherently understands that the exact technological and legal systems designed to make international trade seamless and efficient are the very same systems that render it incredibly vulnerable to systemic exploitation. The mechanics of his operation are absolutely fascinating. Let's look closely at his exploitation of the Automatic Identification System, or AIS.
The AIS was implemented globally as a critical safety protocol.
A VHF transponder system designed to broadcast a ship's dynamic data, its GPS position, speed, and heading along with its static data, like its registry and cargo manifest, to satellites and surrounding vessels to prevent collisions.
And Nortman essentially turns the safety net into a targeting radar.
Utilizing readily available commercial-grade receivers technology you could literally purchase at a consumer electronics store, he intercepts these VHF broadcasts.
He maps the global supply chain as if it were a digital chessboard. He augments the AIS data by employing hacking syndicates based in Calcutta to breach the security feeds of international port cameras,
allowing him visual confirmation of the cargo loading processes.
He identifies high-value targets, for instance, a bulk carrier loaded with 70 tons of refined aluminum or premium Chilean lumber.
But the true genius of Nortman's system lies in his manipulation of international maritime law, specifically the concept of flags of convenience.
He targets vessels entangled in complex, deliberately opaque ownership structures.
He'll target a ship physically registered in the tiny Pacific island nation of Niue, legally owned by a shell corporation based in Panama, operationally headquartered in Liberia, and financially backed by a numbered account in Switzerland.
This labyrinth of dummy corporations is designed by the owners to aggressively avoid taxation and regulatory oversight.
But Nortman understands that when a ship with that profile goes missing, the accountability and the motivation to investigate vanish along with it.
So once Fang's tactical teams hijack the vessel, what happens to the physical evidence?
They offload the high-value cargo in unregulated black markets across Indonesia or the South China Sea. Then Nortman directs the massive empty ship to the Alang shipbreaking yards in Gujarat, India.
Alang is essentially a 6-mile stretch of beach where environmental and labor regulations are non-existent.
Hundreds of massive vessels are driven directly onto the sand and systematically dismantled by hand by thousands of migrant workers.
Within a matter of months, a massive commercial freighter is reduced to scrap steel and melted down.
The physical evidence of the crime is entirely erased from the earth.
It is a functionally airtight business model, insulated by the sheer scale of global trade.
However, Nortman's highly insulated, luxurious existence in Hong Kong is abruptly shattered.
Hugh Rincon.
Yes, Hugh, having exhausted every legal and bureaucratic avenue at Langley, makes the desperate decision to go rogue.
He circumvents agency protocols, secures passage on a freezing FedEx cargo jet, and flies to Hong Kong to rendezvous directly with his asset, Arlene Hart.
This initiates a sequence that is both surreal in its setup and horrifying in its execution.
Arlene possesses detailed intelligence on Nortman's personal life. She knows he is gay and has a documented preference for tall, conventionally handsome Western men.
Hugh fits this profile perfectly.
Arlene orchestrates a classic intelligence honey trap, forcing Hugh, a man who is strictly heterosexual, married, and entirely unaccustomed to field operations, to sit in the window of a high-end restaurant and actively seduce an international pirate mastermind.
The scene is laced with a dark, uncomfortable tension. Hugh manages to catch Nortman's attention. They engage in a sophisticated bilingual conversation, seamlessly transitioning into French to discuss Pierce Brosnan films and global real estate markets.
Nortman takes the bait and invites Hugh back to his ultra-luxurious, highly secure, high-rise apartment.
Hugh navigates the situation, internally panicking, maintaining the facade right up until the exact moment Nortman drops his guard and leans in for a kiss.
That is the moment the trap springs.
A sharp knock at the door interrupts them. Nortman opens it to find Arlene standing in the hallway. Without hesitation, she swings a heavy leather purse heavily weighted with rocks or industrial ball bearings and strikes Nortman with enough kinetic force to render him instantly unconscious.
Hugh drags the pirate into the apartment and they quickly secure him,
tightly duct taping his arms and legs to a heavy dining room chair. When Nortman regains consciousness, he relies on his standard playbook, attempting to play the role of the outraged, innocent international businessman.
But Arlene shatters that illusion.
She calmly reaches into her bag and extracts a heavy, rust-covered claw hammer she casually acquired from a nearby construction site.
This sequence requires the audience to deeply examine the moral injury inherent in intelligence gathering.
Hugh is an analytical mind. His career is defined by reading intelligence briefs and adjusting threat matrices. He does not physically break human beings.
But the stakes have escalated beyond theoretical risk. A radiological weapon is actively transiting toward American soil.
Faced with a ticking clock and a catastrophic threat, Hugh crosses a profound ethical Rubicon.
He takes a roll of industrial duct tape, heavily gags Nortman to suppress the noise, and stands as a complicit witness while Arlene utilizes the rusty hammer to systematically shatter Nortman's kneecap.
The physical reality of the scene is brutal. Nortman experiences catastrophic pain, violently ill from the trauma. When Arlene raises the hammer to crush the other knee, his psychological resistance shatters.
He capitulates entirely, detailing the architecture of the plot.
He confirms the involvement of the North Korean operatives, the acquisition of the cesium in Odessa, the specific loading of the cargo in Petropavlovsk, and the deployment of the dirty bomb.
Having extracted the critical data, Hugh and Arlene abandon the apartment, leaving Nortman bleeding heavily onto his priceless Afghan rug.
But the narrative provides a chilling, deeply sinister coda to the interrogation.
As Nortman lies immobilized on the floor, managing the excruciating pain and waiting to summon medical assistance, he smiles.
Because despite enduring the physical torture, and despite surrendering the broad logistical strokes of the operation, he maintains the psychological high ground.
He knows he successfully compartmentalized the intelligence, withholding one highly specific, crucial variable. He survived the encounter, and he protected a secret that still possesses the potential to ensure the catastrophic success of the attack.
This means that while Hugh finally possesses the actionable warning, his operational picture remains dangerously incomplete.
To understand the true nature of the threat hurtling toward the coast, we must examine the men driving the operation.
We shift our focus to the genesis of the fanaticism, looking closely at the operatives known as Smith and Jones.
The narrative finally unmasks them. They are brothers, Ja Young-bae and Ja Bai-ho, originating from North Korea.
To comprehend their extreme operational dedication, we have to analyze their psychological origin story.
The text provides a harrowing flashback to the brothers standing before an unmarked mound of dirt in Wonsan, North Korea, the grave of their father.
The background we are provided is a searing indictment of the North Korean state's guiding philosophy, the Juche ideology.
Juche advocates for absolute, uncompromising state self-reliance, a political posture that has historically resulted in catastrophic economic isolation and systemic nationwide starvation.
The trauma inflicted upon their family by this system is absolute. Their mother made the ultimate horrifying sacrifice,
literally bartering the bodies of her own daughters to corrupt border guards to secure safe passage for her sons into China.
She remained behind in the failing state and starved to death.
One of the brothers survived a firing squad, shot by his own military commander for refusing an order to systematically rob starving peasants.
And their father. His death was not the result of a political labor camp or execution. He died a slow, agonizing death from a minor, easily treatable bacterial infection.
Simply because the isolated nation lacked access to the most basic medical antibiotics.
This trauma establishes a critical motivational dichotomy within the narrative.
The maritime criminals, Fang and Nortman, are driven purely by unregulated capitalism and greed. They calculate risk against financial reward.
The Jia brothers, however, are fueled by a bottomless reservoir of fanatical grief and deeply entrenched ideology.
They have been psychologically groomed by a lifetime of trauma to view the West, specifically America, as the imperialist architect of their nation's suffering.
They are not executing this complex logistical operation for financial compensation. They are seeking an apocalyptic societal-level revenge.
And when you force ideological fanatics to operate alongside profit-driven mercenaries, severe friction is inevitable.
We see this dynamic violently rupture during the loading sequence in the freezing container yards of Petropavlovsk, Russia.
The environmental conditions are brutal. Sub-zero temperatures, howling winds, and pitch-black darkness.
Fang, a man accustomed to the humid warmth of the South China Sea, is physically miserable and deeply paranoid in the confined, freezing spaces.
The clash of operational methodologies is immediate and lethal. The Jia brothers have meticulously planned the infiltration, successfully bribing the Russian port security guards to ensure unhindered access to the targeted shipping containers.
The plan requires stealth and non-interference.
But as the team moves through the shadows, Fang reverts to his brutal, piratical instincts.
Operating on the belief that a bribed witness is still a liability, Fang steps out of the darkness and drives a combat knife directly into the heart of a Russian guard.
The older Jia brother is absolutely enraged by this action. He had just secured the guard's compliance through financial leverage.
Jack understands the geopolitical reality. Murdering a Russian federal guard on sovereign Russian soil will instantly trigger a massive, highly motivated homicide investigation.
The exact kind of intense, localized heat that a covert operation must avoid at all costs.
But Fang is entirely indifferent to the strategic implications. He hurriedly attempts to stage the scene, arranging the body to simulate a firefight between corrupt guards before the team slips inside the shipping containers to hide.
And here we witness the application of Nortman's logistical genius.
The shipping containers the team infiltrates are not standard commercial boxes. They are heavily stenciled with the official insignia of the United Nations.
And the cargo manifests describe the contents as UN-printed matter, specifically agricultural and educational pamphlets destined for humanitarian aid.
Nortman understands the psychology of port customs. No corrupt official or overworked dock worker is going to break the seals on a container of worthless diplomatic pamphlets to look for black market goods.
The diplomatic cover ensures the containers bypass all secondary security inspections.
But the interior of the container is a meticulously designed Trojan horse. There are no educational materials. The space is outfitted for sustained covert survival.
It is stocked with heavy thermal gear, suspended hammocks, chemical sanitation toilets, camping stoves, and satellite communication equipment.
The operatives seal the heavy steel doors from the inside. We then follow the container as it is hoisted high into the freezing air by a massive gantry crane, lowered deep into the cavernous cargo hold of the Star of Bali, and secured.
The ship immediately set sail, driving directly into the teeth of a brutal Pacific winter storm.
The physical reality of existing inside that sealed steel box during a Pacific crossing is nightmarish.
The operatives are plunged into total darkness, subjected to violent 15-foot oceanic swells.
The interior atmosphere quickly becomes toxic, saturated with the smell of diesel fumes, chemical toilets, and violent seasickness.
Fang, suffering intensely in the dark, finally realizes the magnitude of his error in aligning with ideological fanatics, resolving that if he survives, he will retire.
But his regrets are irrelevant. The delivery mechanism is engaged, and the radiological weapon is irrevocably on its way.
This propels us into the final sequence of our sources, exploring the desperate convergence of these plot lines in Alaska.
Hugh Rincon, having secured the actionable intelligence through brutal means in Hong Kong, understands that feeding the data back into the CIA's bureaucratic machine will result in further paralysis.
He bypasses Langley entirely.
He endures yet another grueling, freezing flight, this time huddled in the unheated hold of a FedEx cargo jet, surrounded by stacked crates of live, incessantly clucking chickens.
And finally touches down in Anchorage, Alaska.
Hugh's decision to break the chain of command leads him directly to his childhood friend, Kyle Chase.
Kyle is the operational head of the FBI's Joint Terrorism Task Force in the Alaskan sector.
Hugh arrives at the federal building before dawn, physically exhausted, freezing, and carrying the weight of an imminent catastrophe.
So what does this all mean?
When Hugh finally lays the intelligence out on Kyle's desk, he forces the system to see the connections. He presents the undeniable proof that North Korea is not merely engaging in distant, rhetorical saber-rattling.
They have actively leveraged the global black market.
They have secured highly dispersible cesium-137.
They have formed a tactical alliance with the world's premier maritime smugglers.
And they have loaded a functional dirty bomb onto a commercial container ship, the Star of Bali,
which is currently utilizing the cover of a Pacific storm to steam directly toward the American coastline, hiding perfectly within the millions of tons of legitimate, uninspected cargo that fuels the global economy.
Hugh meticulously outlines the strategic nightmare of the chosen target.
The terrorists are not aiming for the highly defended, symbolically significant airspace of New York or Washington, D.C.
They are targeting the massive, largely exposed logistical infrastructure of the West Coast.
Hugh explains that a radiological dispersion device detonated within the port facilities of Valdez, Alaska, would instantly irradiate the terminal that processes 14% of the nation's domestic oil supply, triggering an immediate, catastrophic energy crisis.
Alternatively, detonating the device near the dense concentration of military installations in Anchorage would critically compromise America's strategic nuclear defense posture in the Pacific.
It is a highly calculated strike aimed at the logistical, economic, and military heart of the nation.
Kyle is a deeply experienced, hardened federal agent, accustomed to dealing with high-level threats. But the text notes that when Hugh explicitly names cesium-137 and details the projected contamination radius, the blood physically drains from Kyle's face.
The abstract geopolitical threat instantly materializes into a terrifying reality.
Kyle does not convene a threat assessment committee. He does not draft a memo to Washington. His immediate, autonomic response is to pick up his phone and call his wife, Layla.
He bypasses all pleasantries and orders her to immediately pack their children into the car and drive 100 miles south to Seward, Alaska.
He is desperately attempting to physically remove his family from the projected radiation plume of Anchorage. In that moment, the massive geopolitical narrative becomes intensely, painfully personal.
And it is within this atmosphere of escalating panic that the narrative delivers its final, agonizing twist of dramatic irony.
Hugh, having delivered the warning, asks Kyle to utilize the FBI's interagency resources to locate the Coast Guard cutter Sojourner Truth.
He knows the threat is approaching via the maritime borders, and he is desperately trying to ensure the safety of his estranged wife, Sarah, who is operating on the front lines.
It is a devastating moment for the reader. We know exactly where Sarah is.
We know that just hours prior, she was operating only a few hundred yards away from the Star of Bali.
We know she communicated directly with the captain concealing the weapon. She had the dirty bomb within her operational grasp, and she allowed it to sail away into the storm.
Because she was entirely deprived of the intelligence that Hugh was fighting so desperately to disseminate.
That missed connection perfectly encapsulates the tragic thesis of the entire narrative.
The tactical operators on the front lines, who possess the capability and the courage to neutralize the threat, are rendered functionally blind by the very bureaucratic systems designed to coordinate their defense.
And that profound institutional failure wraps up the incredible, harrowing journey laid out in these sources.
We have tracked a lethal logistical chain across the globe.
We started in the bloody, chaotic aftermath of a bombing on a sunny beach in Thailand.
We moved to the opulent, cologne-scented offices of an arms broker dealing in post-Soviet nightmares in Odessa.
We examined the stifling, risk-averse blindness within the boardrooms of the CIA in Langley, contrasting it sharply with the freezing, violent, and highly competent reality of the Coast Guard on the Bering Sea.
And we confronted the severe moral compromises demanded on the blood-stained floor of a Hong Kong high-rise.
These excerpts synthesize to illustrate a highly chilling reality. The architecture of global security does not resemble a solid wall. It resembles a very frayed, incredibly porous thread.
Often our safety does not rely on the flawless execution of perfect bureaucratic systems or infallible surveillance technology.
It relies entirely on rogue analysts who are willing to break protocol, sacrifice their personal lives, and commit morally questionable acts simply to force the system to see the data points that urgently need connecting.
Let me leave you with this practical application. The next time you are standing on a coastline or driving over a suspension bridge and you look out at the horizon to see one of those massive floating mountains of steel, a commercial container ship stacked hundreds of feet high with thousands of identical metal boxes.
I want you to think about the mechanics of this deep dive. Think about the incredibly vast, functionally unsearchable supply chain of global commerce.
Think about how much of our daily existence, our economy, and our safety relies on the fragile assumption that those steel boxes hold nothing but flat-screen televisions and construction lumber.
And consider how easily that massive trusting system can be weaponized by those who understand its vulnerabilities.
Which raises an important question, something for you to mull over long after we conclude this analysis. In a modern globalized world where billions of tons of cargo must cross our oceans every single day to sustain our economies, and where our defensive bureaucratic systems require absolute, undeniable proof before they are willing to disrupt that flow, is it actually possible to stop a catastrophic threat that is designed to hide perfectly in plain sight?
Or are we ultimately just relying on the sheer desperate luck of operators like Hugh Rincon breaking the rules in the dark to keep the lights on for the rest of us?
That is a deeply unsettling reality to confront.
It is. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the invisible logistical wars being fought across our oceans. Stay curious, stay analytical, and we will see you next time.